I'm pleased to introduce Moraga Orinda Fire District Board Member Craig Jorgens. He's going to speak on a presentation of fire prevention, a subject of great importance to the Orinda community. Craig?
Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to the Orinda Association for giving me the opportunity to help make Orinda more fire-wise. I noticed, having listened to the three candidates tonight, that there has been a lot of talk about how to make Orinda, the need to make Orinda safer, and the desire to make it safer from a fire standpoint. And I personally have been a fan of that for the last 5 years. This is not a new concept for me. I think it's been a very important topic for a long time for Orinda. So my objective tonight is to make all of us aware of how to make Orinda more fire-wise. So the next slide will show you that the first thing we need to understand is that fires don't stop unless Mother Nature cooperates. The wind needs to stop, it needs to be raining, it needs to be foggy, but at the end of the day, the only way that you can stop a fire is with prevention. So we happen to have a longtime Orinda resident named John Radke. He's a professor at UC Berkeley, and he's one of the founding members of the Center for Catastrophic Risk Management. His specialized models have been used to predict the impacts of firestorms on California landscape and on the infrastructure that we have built. He also happens to be a fully trained firefighter, which is a little unusual for professors. So Professor Radke, as a fire expert, will tell you that wildfires can only be controlled through prevention and not just through suppression. As a matter of fact, Dr. Radke and his students prepared models initially for North Orinda for the HOA, back before I was even on the fire board, for our HOA, as an example of basically scrutinizing his models to make sure that they were accurate. And then those models were actually used by our fire district as support for their application for a $4.2 million grant that we actually received to do the North Orinda shaded fuel break. And in that fuel break, it basically built a line all the way from Berkeley, basically all the way over to Pleasant Hill, along the border between Orinda and Lafayette and some of Berkeley, and the Briones, like 25,000 acre wildland that's out there. Also to understand the importance of this, recently Governor Newsom agreed with the U.S. Forest Service to spend $1 billion on prevention. And that was basically removing fuel and performing controlled burns in the forests in California. Again, prevention is really, really important. So how does this affect us here in Orinda? Well, many of you have already utilized the free chipper program. I actually brought this down about 2 or 3 years ago. They had a program like this up in Lake Tahoe. And when I was visiting up there, got a brochure on that and brought it down to the chief. And we started out with chipping only, and broadcasting the fuel back into the chipped up things back into people's open spaces. But then eventually expanded it so that we would actually haul it away. MOFD has a very creative program. They require you to have 3 to 5 neighbors get together to, as a group, require a chipper day. And that way you make sure that you work with your neighbors. There are a lot of advantages to an aggressive chipper program, and you can have very dramatic results at a very low cost, and it has a lot of side benefits. So some of the benefits in 2020, just the first 5 months, MOFD in Orinda and Moraga together removed 190 tons of fuel in the first 5 months, and only doing the chipping program a few days a week, not full time. The other benefits that you see is people get to, as you do your work, if the neighbor doesn't do their work and their house catches on fire, the heat from that fire catches your house on fire. So there's a community benefit that everyone shares when you can have, the whole community do all the work that they need to do. You also get to know your neighbors. You get to identify neighbors in your community that might need further assistance when there is an emergency. Somebody might be elderly, need help getting out of their house, need help understanding that there is an emergency. And also, when you get to know your neighbors, you also get to know who doesn't belong in your neighborhood. And so that from a sort of a neighborhood watch standpoint, that's a benefit. And then a number of the groups that have gotten together also, after they use the emergency notification services that are provided by the county, they often have supplemental things. They have Twitter accounts between the various neighbors. They know when they receive the notification, they start honking their horns. So it really awakens the entire neighborhood. And those are all really beneficial. And then these neighborhoods, on the next slide, we can see the next step in the program is to actually be part of a Firewise program. And Firewise is a national organization, and is there to promote and certify the proper preparedness of a neighborhood against wildfires. So MOFD would actually, part of the process is MOFD comes out and tells you what needs to be done to be able to have a safe neighborhood from a fire standpoint, what fuel needs to go away, what modifications need to be made to the houses. You have to have an evacuation plan, and you actually put together a whole proposal that then is approved by the Firewise program. I think it's actually based in Colorado. And MOFD will then come out and certify that you have actually done the work that you're needing to do. So already there are 1,400 homes in Orinda that participate in this. It includes the whole neighborhood in Wilder, Sleepy Hollow, the Downs, and there are roughly 20 neighborhood programs that are already participating in this. So that's a huge percentage of our population already, and it's only really been going for a year, year and a half. There is also an umbrella organization that has been formed in Orinda called the Orinda Firewise Council. That's an all-volunteer organization, and they really support these smaller neighborhood Firewise groups. And one of the things they do, they coordinate and share best practices across the neighborhoods. They provide training for these neighborhoods. If you want to start a Firewise group, you can call the folks at the Orinda Firewise Council. They will come out. They will give you training on how to fill out the paperwork, develop a plan, understand how to get your neighbors involved. They will again share the best practices that they have and really start spreading this good word throughout the entire community. They also have separate sort of subcommittees that are doing research into insurance and what's going to happen in December when some of our insurance, the moratorium on canceling insurance goes away. They've been working on that. They're doing some lobbying at the state and at the local level to try to make sure that people will have the availability for insurance. They're working with the local utilities to make sure they're doing their part and coordinating with MOFD, of course, to make sure the utilities are doing their part. They have obligations to do mitigation also. And if you want to get a hold of them, you can go to this www.orindafirewisecouncil.org, contact Sue Wecht or Melanie Light. They're both very involved, very committed to making Orinda safer. And please join now, join a Firewise community, start a Firewise community, do your part to make Orinda safe from potentially devastating firestorms. And as part of this, the fire district has actually implemented a new fire code that is much stricter than the old one was, because it's much safer for the community if you have better prevention. So what does the fire code mean for you? Well, it's going to be going into effect the 1st of next year. There are a number of landscape changes I'll go over in the next slide, things you have to do, more mitigation you have to do around your home. Also for new homes and for remodels, there are home hardening things you have to do. You have to put in spark resistant vents. Often when there are these 50-mile-an-hour winds, it blows not only the flames, but it blows sparks. Sometimes things go a mile away from the front of the fire. And those sparks, when they hit your house, the first thing they do is try to go through the house. They can't do that, so they can't go down. They have to go up. And where do they go? They go into those nice little roof vents that your contractor built over the last 50 years in almost every house. And when those sparks get inside of your attic, they start the attic on fire and then your house burns down. So they make wonderful little vents that you retrofit into your house, and they stop those sparks from being able to get either into your roof vents or to your foundation vents. They also, the new fire code will require for, again, new construction and big remodels, sprinkler systems under the eaves of your house, because again, it doesn't do any good to put the fire out, to try to put the fire out once it's already burning your house down inside from a big fire. You have to keep it from starting the house. And then in real estate transfers, basically the new rule, it's how to implement this new fire code thoroughly in the backyards, not just the front yards you can see. So every time there's a real estate transfer, you can you take pictures and send in to MOFD. They make it fairly easy to, and with a quick turnaround, to be able to certify that the seller has met the appropriate vegetation requirements, removal of all the vegetation and meeting the fire code before it's transferred. The next page is what happens with these new rules as far as each individual homeowner. I know my house, and my wife is a very active person in the garden clubs, and every landscaper, I think, in the world for the last 50 years has decided that softening the front of your home by planting bushes along the foundation is a wonderful thing, and it looks great, but it's dangerous from a fire standpoint. So the new rule is for 2 feet out from the foundation of your house and 1 foot up from that box, you can't have things that burn, ground cover, even bark or mulch. It has to be, ideally, it's bare dirt, gravel, something. There are a list of things on the fire board's MOFD's website that will explain things. If you put succulents in there are some things you can put in that are not very flammable that are okay. But in general, you want to keep a barrier between the outside world and the areas next to your house. So there's a box 2 feet deep, 1 foot high. If you do have plants there, as long as you keep them trimmed up so it's only the trunks of things that are in that first foot. The trunks don't really burn very well, but it's all the dead leaves and things that gather at the bottoms of plants that are really flammable and really start at the edge of your house, burn the bottom part of the siding, they get up underneath the stucco, and your whole house burns down. So that's probably the most, I would say, from looking at my house, that's the thing that I was the worst offender on. And so we had to cut down a number of things, trim things back a lot, trim things up a lot, and it's made a big difference in how vulnerable or how much less vulnerable our house would be in a firestorm. Also, the vertical clearances above the roofs and out from the house have increased from 5 feet to 6 feet. So you need to make sure that all the branches are trimmed 6 feet above your house and 6 feet out from your house. Again, creating a big air gap, because fires, can't be as intense for as far. So keeping that big air gap is important. Eucalyptus and Monterey pine trees are very dangerous. They have lots of oil in them and they burn very hot. And so not only is it required to trim those up and trim those back away, if the trunk even is within 6 feet of your house, you now have to actually remove them because they are so dangerous. Only eucalyptus and Monterey pines. And then juniper and bamboo are, again, something that the junipers can create a 20-foot flame, even though they're only a few feet high. They just have so much oil and so much dead that's usually down inside of them. So the new rule is that within 10 feet of roads, you have to we have 2 more years to do this. So they extended the time because it could be a lot of work. All the juniper and bamboo that is within 10 feet of a road has to be removed. And part of that is because you don't want those fire flames that are 20 feet long extending out into the road into the emergency evacuation route. The other things that have not changed, the date for having to meet the abatement requirements has moved up by 2 weeks from June 15th to June 1st. The reason for that is that we find that the fire season has actually been starting earlier and earlier. And in the past, when we started on June 15th, then you have to have an inspection, then you have to give them a notice that they need to fix things. And by the time people were actually getting around to fix it, we actually, I believe, had 2 fires in the last 2 years that were started by the people who were out doing the abatement work, but they were doing it in August. They weren't doing it in June or in May in this case. So we moved that up by 2 weeks. Again, you still have to do the annual grasses to 3 inch. You still have to have the road 3 feet back from the edge of the pavement and 15 feet up from the pavement. You have to have no branches, no bushes, anything in there. And again, that's to create a very viable evacuation route. So the fire trucks can get in and the cars don't want to leave can leave without having the flames encroaching on them too much. Again, ladder fuels, that's a word that a lot of people, I didn't know 4 years ago. Basically, there are grasses, there are what they call ladder fuels, which are the intermediate fuels, and then there are the trees. And you want to make sure that the air gap between the grasses and the bottom of the ladder fuel, and then you also need to make sure that ladder fuel is bushes, basically. So it's things that transition from a grass that burns all of our hillsides. You want to get rid of the brush because the brush burns more intensely than the grass does. It then goes up, starts the trees on fire. And once you get the trees on fire, then it's a big fire and it's really, really hard to put out. So again, an air gap of 6 feet between the top of your bushes and the bottom of the tree. So that means if you only have grass, you only have to trim the tree up 6 feet. If you have bushes, you might have to trim the tree up more than that. That's not a new rule, but it's an important rule. Again, you also have to get rid of dead trees and dying trees and dead branches. And then on to the last slide that we have for tonight. One of the most important things, or the most important objective of all of this work, is not only to protect your homes and your livelihood. The number one thing is lives. And so evacuation is incredibly important. And we need to make sure that everyone signs up for the CWS emergency warning system. There are other notification systems and information systems, Nixle, Pulse Point, things like that. They are not meant as emergency warning systems. The only emergency warning system is the CWS system. And you can sign up for that at www.cococws.us. There are 3 different levels of notices they have. They have an alert, which is, assuming they have this much time, 5 hours before they think the event will be a problem for you. They have a warning, which is 3 hours before they think you will have a problem. And then they actually have an evacuation order, which means immediately grab your go bag, get in your car, and leave. And when they say leave, there aren't gathering points for these sorts of things. The answer is get in your car and drive to Walnut Creek or Pleasanton and get a long way away. And do it early and often. As soon as you think that you feel uncomfortable, leave. It's always easier to come back. And be sure when you're implementing this, there are detailed instructions about how to make your phone, if you turn your phone off at night, literally power it down, nothing can get through. If you put your phone on silent and you've set this as one of the emergency numbers, it will override being on silent and still notify you at night. So it's important to read the instructions, enter the phone numbers you're required to, go to the settings, they have them for both the iPhone and the Androids, and really implement the system well. So that's the end of the presentation for tonight. Please join a Firewise group, get a hold of the either MOFD or to the Orinda Firewise Council, and they will help you understand what you can do to make Orinda as fire safe as possible. And I want to thank the Orinda Association, I see Cindy Powell up here, for giving me the opportunity to have this presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Craig. And that concludes our program for this evening. The Orinda Association looks forward to presenting more programs of interest to the community on future dates. Thank you for joining us. Good night.